Has everyone gotten to say something? That question sort of ruins the flow of your conversation. Sorry about that. All right. So, what I want to do, as I said, I'm going to break it up a little bit. I'm going to backtrack a touch, finish up our discussion from the Yancy article. Yancy mentions Lewis Gordon and quotes heavily from Lewis Gordon. Lewis Gordon, who in Existentia Africana makes the argument that Frederick Douglass should be seen through an existentialist lens, and we can use the themes of existentialism to address questions of contemporary concern with respect to issues of race in particular, but also, as Yancy points out, with respect to gender too. And please don't forget, there's another quiz. I forgot to... Are we at 8 already? You sure? What did you just turn in? So then that would be correct. Quiz 8. But you have until next Monday to do that. I actually didn't make note of that moments ago. Bless you. You have a... or may God bless you. Anticipate our talk later on. You have until Monday to do that quiz. That'll be on Dostoevsky. It's another short answer done individually. The quiz that was for today, if you didn't get it in on time, you can turn it in late for partial credit, but only at most half credit, so keep that in mind. Quiz that was due 10 minutes ago was on Yancy and de Beauvoir. All right, so what is the relationship? Why bad faith? I think that's the name of this entire text, which is incredibly complex, utilizing the language of existentialism, in particular the language of Jean-Paul Sartre. I can go through this fairly quickly because you've seen it already in a multitude of ways. I think it helps to see different approaches to concepts that are a little bit difficult, a little bit complex. Better not rain. What's the chance of rain today? Like only... What? It's like 10%, it said.
I was just in car like 5 minutes ago, and it was like 10 minutes ago.
I mean, people don't know what to do when it rains here, so no one's going to be coming to this round table except us.
Yeah, I'll do it.
Because they're all already here.
You're already here. Well, don't go on the roads. It's dangerous. So, the arguments. Let's look back to the role of bad faith. Bad faith is a form of deception, a form of self-deception. What is it that racism in general, but we can talk about, he specifically focuses on anti-black racism, does Lewis Gordon. What is it that bad faith has to do with? How does bad faith relate to questions of racism? How does bad faith relate to questions in the way that Frederick Douglass was responding to early versions of racism? How in the world are those concepts interconnected at all? Same thing, perhaps, we could talk about with de Beauvoir. Where's the connection? Do you remember? There was a couple of examples. I'll give some more, though, to wrap this up. What role has bad faith to play with respect to an evaluation of racism? Yeah?
It's like thinking that you know something even though you only have like stereotypes to rely on.
Yes, he does mention stereotypes, and there was problems with stereotypes related to that. That's not quite it. There are 3 hands that went up, all I think at the same time. All of you go at once.
Okay, so...
Really? You're really going to do that? I don't know who was first. Okay, go ahead. We'll go in that order. 1, 2, 3.
So I remember from the Yancy reading, he was talking about Woodwar's The Serious Man.
That's right.
And how that related to the concept of whiteness. How people who were typically racist would believe that whiteness was something that was concrete and existed objectively from anything.
And from that come the stereotypes to tie into your earlier point. That's right.
And that the bad faith comes in because it's not something that was concrete. It was more socially constructed. And then from that social construction of whiteness came the degradation of a blackness, which was then imposed on these people.
So, to jump ahead, to get to your points. The serious man, the one who evades anguish. What does that mean? Anguish is a concept that's deep within existentialism. What does anguish mean, and what is the evader of anguish? What has that to do with any of this?
Like evading accountability for your own morals, kind of.
Precisely. And with relation to let's look at Frederick Douglass, for example, and in his autobiographies, he responds in a way that's very similar to the language that we see later on with Jean-Paul Sartre, and then later on with Frantz Fanon, who is a psychoanalyst and existentialist philosopher, I would argue, who suffered through the oppression of French colonialism in Algeria and Mauritania. And he was very much influenced by Jean-Paul Sartre, and Lewis Gordon, very much influenced by Frantz Fanon. The idea of Frederick Douglass being seen as, we talked about this last time, the bad faith here applies to whites who claimed to base their moral system upon something external to them, values that are outside of human construction. And they continually have to re-up that. That's the word I kept using last time, and I still haven't found a better one. They perpetually have to renew. Yes. What is re-up? They have to renew their constant lies to oneself that the people that they're treating, that the cattle that they're treating as cattle are actually not things. They constantly have to lie to themselves to justify it. That goes back to the stereotypes. Stereotypes enable you to feel okay about treating other people differently. And this is a bit of a trivial example, but I feel better when a pickup truck driver drives like a jackass, because it fits what I already expect of them. And when people tell me, I kind of joke about this, when students tell me, you're not going to believe it, saw a pickup truck driver driving like a jackass the other day. There's a little bit of me that feels good. That's not good. That's not a positive. You all know I have a bias against pickup truck drivers. I think you do now. That's not a positive, but that's how stereotypes can perpetuate this, right? To renew it. De Beauvoir says this with respect to issues of gender, issues of sex, and issues of an existentialist ethics. It is something that is constantly renewed. You are not done. To presume that you are, to presume that there are principles or values that are independent of our choice, these are constant choices that we're making all of the time, is to dissociate ourselves from our projects. Okay. And in doing so, we're deceiving ourselves by thinking, these aren't actually humans. Well, maybe they're 3/5 of a human, to justify voting numbers in the South at one point. But we know that they know. This is Frederick Douglass. I know that they know that I am a human. I know that they know we suffer when we're ripped apart from our families. Not even animals have that problem, as Yancy puts it. Even animals on farms get treated better, in that the mother gets to stay with their young. The treatment is oppressive, it is systematic, it is violent, and it is based upon lying to oneself continually. To treat a man, a woman, as a thing, and at the same time have laws that proscribe teaching them how to read. There is the obvious lie, right? And Frederick Douglass makes this point in his work called The 5th of July, or What is the 4th of July to the Slave, in 1854, right? He had just been freed at this point. But consider that. America celebrating the 4th of July. What is it celebrating? Freedom, independence. What is the 4th of July to the slave? And in it he says, do you expect me to make an argument that I am a human being, that I am a man, and that all men are equal? You've already declared it. And what is he saying? What does he mean by declared it? Of course, it's explicit. It's in the Declaration. We know what we're doing, and we're constantly lying to ourselves. It is a form of bad faith. And straightforward argument, as Douglas puts it, is not going to be sufficient to point these inconsistencies out. Did you have a question?
Is Lewis Gordon the originator of the concept of seriousness? Is he the first?
No.
Coined seriousness in terms of this kind of existential argument?
It is Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir that the term comes from. So Sartre calls it a spirit of seriousness. Simone de Beauvoir talks about the serious man, and they mean the same thing in each of these cases. I like referencing Gordon because I think he puts it well. The language he uses is good, and some of his examples are good too. This is a kind of a weird one, and it might not make sense at first, but we'll see how it might. So Gordon, I think, expands on this concept and makes it a little bit clearer. And in a way, it goes back to Friedrich Nietzsche and what he'll call a spirit of gravity. And maybe before that, Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer talks about the seriousness, the spirit, not spirit of seriousness, but he talks about seriousness as the opposite of humor, of laughter. The serious man is not just somber, like, oh, this is really important, that kind of serious. But the serious man thinks that he knows an ultimate element of reality. The serious man for Schopenhauer is dogmatic. It's one who is incapable of laughter because of their dogmatism. And that dogmatism comes from a presumption of having access to absolutes that are somehow external to us. And we're lying to ourselves when we fail to recognize that. The example that Gordon gives, I'll just read it too, because it's hard to make sense. A friend of his asks, why do you eat pig? Or rather, he asks a friend of his, why do you eat pig? And his friend says, why do you call it pig? It's a good question. What are you going to have for dinner tonight? You're going to have bacon. Do you mean you're going to have pig? Why would you call it that? Why do you call it pig? It's not pig when you eat it. It's pork. He responded, so what should we call fish when we eat it? Don't we still call it fish? I asked him, poisson, which is French for fish. It takes a great deal of self-deception to transform many objects into food. If it's the connection to life that we attempt to avoid, then we are all lost. For even the vegetarian has to eat something that was once alive. Many objects can provide us with nutrients, but it is only those that we desire that are considered food. That is what is involved for it to mean food. To be food, it must be valued as such. There's an element of Sartrean conception of meaning attributed to by a conscious being. Yet a transformation seems to occur in the presence of objects like food. We don't regard them as food in virtue of our desire for them. We regard them as food in virtue of what we claim they are as such. What is bread? It's food. No, it's only food because we grant it that, because we want it to be that. The analogy he's making is we're doing the same thing with human beings. Bread, for example, to borrow from Sartre, actually, is no longer a baked substance. Bread is regarded in its entirety as food, essentially, so to speak. Its meaning as food is a function of what it is. For the spirit of seriousness, bread is desirable because it is seen to be necessary to live, a value written in an intelligible heaven, and because bread is nourishing. There he's quoting Jean-Paul Sartre. Bread is regarded by many of us to be desirable because we need it, not because we want it. We face many inedible objects without admitting our role in their rejection as food. And he says, we lie to ourselves. That's a weird example, but does it make sense to you? Do you have other examples? We don't eat dog. Why not? Because dogs aren't food. Why not? They are some places, right? That value judgment, that comes from ourselves, this transformation of choice into a condition of human nature on the basis of God. Here we get into the transition that I wanted to get to, into your reading for today. Or any substitute, that goes back to de Beauvoir. Any substitute, whether it's external values that come from science, that come from culture, that come from this presumption of a human nature that I can't help but live through. It closes off the totality of human possibilities. That's straight out of Simone de Beauvoir. He's not quoting de Beauvoir there, but he might as well. That's straight out of her, The Second Sex. Go ahead.
If you stop lying to yourself, what's the next step?
How do you mean? What do you mean? So
Like,
what's the goal?
If you stop saying like, oh, it's not a pig, it's pork. If you just said, okay, this used to be a pig, now it's dead, now I'm going to eat it. I'm not going to eat a dog, I don't know why, but I won't. But I'm going to eat a cow.
I am aware of the arbitrariness, the arbitrary and capricious nature of what gets constituted as food. I'm also, with relation to the discussion here, I'm also aware of the arbitrary categorizing of individuals as of greater value than others, and that it isn't because of any absolutes that are that we discover in nature, so to speak. I'm constantly aware of the choices that humans have made that lead us to this position where we are now, including the choices that I continually make. So you're not, what happens after you recognize you're in bad faith and you try to avoid that, you continually try to avoid it. You're not done. It's the...
But like, even if you recognize it, like you're still eating it.
Oh, yeah, he's not saying we shouldn't.
Okay.
He's not, that's not the point of it. Although an argument could be made beyond that, that's not his goal there. That's true. Did you want to?
Is he talking in relation just to humans? Because there are absolutely multiple species that have a specific diet, not because they have to follow a specific diet, but prefer to eat certain...
Animals can't engage in bad faith. Animals can't deceive themselves because animals are not concerned with truth. Yeah, how would I go with that? Yeah, animals can't. To jump to Kierkegaard, which is to say back to Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard has a fantastic quote. It's something like, oh, I forgot it. Among all, how about this? Among all Christians, is there a Christian? That's actually a meaningful sentence, though it seems like, what? Oh, he's being ironic. It's a different kind of question than, among all the ducks, is there a duck? Yeah, thank you. Do you get it? The first question makes sense. The second one doesn't, because ducks don't pretend to be ducks. Christians can pretend to be Christian. People can put on airs. They can put on pretense. They can lie to themselves. I don't think ducks can do that. I mean, you might find a video of a duck pretending to be a cat. It's not really pretending to be a cat. Somebody dressed it up for the sake of that video. That's what happened there. Yes?
In Ventura Harbor, I saw a guy that had like 4 parrots. And they were trained and they would sit and they would fly and then they would rock. But like when people see that, I feel like they think, why don't the birds just leave?
I don't know. They've been trained. It's the same thing with elephants.
What is that?
That are full grown and are held by a little rope. Why don't you just run away, elephant? Well, as a baby, it was tied to a chain, and it's like Plato's prisoners. It's gotten accustomed to it. We can tie it into this perhaps as well. We've gotten accustomed to see the world as in a particular way, and there's nothing we can do about it. The bird might say, if the bird were capable of bad faith, it's always been this way. These are rules, these are regulations, these are systems that have been set in place before my existence, and there's nothing I could do to stop them. There's nothing I can do about it. Here's Lewis Gordon with Franz Fanon in the background. He says, the ultimate figure of seriousness is absolute consciousness, one that has achieved itself as an object of desire. God. God serves as an external objective impetus for all value. But if God were to shout, do X, whatever that is, here we jump into the next discussion. The reason why cannot itself be God. We lie to ourselves. We slough off responsibility by putting it on something else. Why should I be good? Why should I do this? Because it's a commandment. No, you're not done with your responsibility because you still freely have to choose to abide by that commandment. And when you're doing that, you're also being rational individually in choosing that particular command and what it means. How you consciously react to it isn't a simple matter of, why are you doing this? Because it's a commandment. There's always more to it than that. Sorry.
Nothing.
Nope. All right. Then this takes us to the next reading. Actually, before I jump into Dostoevsky, this cheerful fellow, any other comments or remaining concerns about the reading or the Yancy article? Before anything else? Question? Yes.
Oh, no, I was just punching my face.
Yeah, I know. That's always a question. If your hand is anywhere near your face, I assume. No? Okay. All right, let's move on. Who was this fellow? We already did an introduction to him when we looked at the notes from Underground. So refer back to that. He was a fascinating figure. I mentioned at one point that, I think I mentioned this last time, he was rounded up as being part of a group that was potentially a threat, or was seen as a threat to the government at the time, and he was rounded up with a number of others where he was going to be summarily executed. And he was on the verge of being executed within a minute, and they commuted the sentence. I think this was done on purpose. This was a common practice. It was a mock execution. There's very few things as bad as that, pretending to shoot that you're going to kill someone. He was on the verge of, he knew he was dying. He was going to die, and then they stopped at the last second. That's significant, I think, in his life. And he ended up in 4 years in a Siberian camp. And in fact, it's through that time in the Siberian camp that he wrote, I believe, or started working on Notes from Underground, and the Brothers Karamazov, which is where you have the reading for today. What do we know about him? Walter Kaufmann, probably one of the best sources of existentialist philosophy, puts it this way. Dostoevsky was a Christian, and for that matter, also a rabid anti-Semite, anti-Catholic, and anti-Western Russian nationalist. You probably noted that, his distaste in the voice of Ivan for popery, I think is a term he used at one point. He's not a big fan of the Catholics. So if you have background in Catholicism, you probably caught that and thought, wow, this guy's a bit harsh. And he even gets Aloysia to back up and say, Ivan, you've misrepresented the Catholics. You've misrepresented the Jesuits. They're not all that bad, which is interesting that he does that. But Dostoevsky clearly had some vehement disagreements with the Catholic religion. He is an Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, and this is significant. In Russian Orthodoxy, the age of culpability, the age of reason, is around 7 or 8. And the story that we have before this one, I'm going to jump to that now. Actually, there's some wonderful quotes, though, from the text. I'm not going to go through them all here, and I'd like to pair them. Here's the youthful Fyodor, also not smiling. And didn't I show you last time, the only time I've ever seen a picture of him smiling, is when he's dead. Do you remember that? Clearly, there was a little bit of a smirk on his deathbed. I'm pretty sure. And I've never seen any other photo of him smiling. See? Mystery of human existence lies not just in staying alive, but finding something to live for. This is so existentialist, as we'll see. No, not really. Not really smiling there. And this quote you've probably heard before at some point. The degree of civilization in a society can be judged by entering its prisons. He spent time in prison. He has some understanding of that. He wrote about prisons. What would he say of America today? Don't know. Yeah, I do. We know. We know what he would say. All right, let's get to the story. Here's an image of the Grand Inquisitor. This was the original cover of his book, but the editors were like, no, you can't do that. I don't even know what that is. I happened upon it accidentally. I assume you would. What is it?
Star Wars.
Okay. But is he not called the Grand Inquisitor?
Not really.
Oh, really?
Not really. I don't remember.
What do you mean not really? Either is.
It's something to do with one of the Geonosis Sith. I don't remember exactly.
Okay. Well, I was looking for a cover of the book. This guy showed up. I just assumed, Grand Inquisitor, probably for some contemporary movie.
Be the Grand Inquisitor from Rebels. It's
Okay.
like a Disney show.
Oh,
I haven't
really?
watched it, so.
All right. Well, I apologize. That was a failed attempt.
What was that quote one more time?
The slides are posted too, by the way. But this one.
Yes.
So the degree of civilization is said to be judged by entrance. How do you treat your prisoners? It's an interesting question. I don't know how much we think about that. Dostoevsky thought about all sorts of things. The Grand Inquisitor. This is a section in a larger book called The Brothers Karamazov, which is just chock full of philosophical material. In particular, philosophy of religion. I can't possibly explain the entire text to you. You have to read it. It's a very long reading, but I encourage you to do so, at least before you die. Not right. Don't read it on your deathbed. This may not be the best book for that. Read Tuesdays with Maury's if you're going to do that. But this is a section, the Grand Inquisitor. It's titled that, and it follows a section which sometimes I cover in my intro class called the Rebellion. So those in intro may remember, I think I covered it last semester. And that section in Rebellion, it's Ivan talking to his brother Aloysia. And in the story, Aloysia is a younger brother who's going to become a monk. He's going to become a monk. And Ivan's a weird dude. He's got some issues, significant issues. He's collecting newspaper articles about the horrible things that humans do to other humans. And animals too, but mostly newspaper clippings of what moral evils humans do to humans, as opposed to natural evils. And it's been suggested that Dostoevsky himself probably did research for that section, and those are actual stories that Ivan retells to his younger brother Aloysia. Stories of horrible, horrible abuse to other people, in particular children. And the reason why that's significant goes back to what I mentioned a moment ago with Russian Orthodoxy, the level or the age of reason, and therefore culpability or responsibility is around 7 or 8. Before that, one is wholly innocent. The adults, as Ivan says at one point, they've eaten of the apple. Damn them, I don't care about them. Ivan's telling a story to his brother Aloysia about how horrible humans are. And that even if there is an afterlife in which there is a heaven, that salvation, that reward in the end is not justified so long as there is one, and of course there's way more than one, but so long as there is just one child who suffers horribly. And Ivan retells of a multitude of cases. And Aloysia's barely able to handle. At one point, Ivan asks Aloysia, he says, Ivan, look, if you were tasked with creating the heavens and the earth, this is the rebellion, this is the section before the Grand Inquisitor, if you were tasked with creating this heaven and earth, right, but the salvation in the end is only possible if there is the necessity of the suffering of just one child under 8, Aloysia says no. Aloysia says he would not consent to construct the universe on those grounds. Which is to say, both Aloysias, both Karamazovs, Aloysia and Ivan, would not have made the world the way that God apparently has.
Was it kind of a poke at that then, when he when Jesus or God brought the little girl back to the coffin?
Yeah, that's a confusing. I hope when you are reading that's from the reading for today, the Grand Inquisitor. I hope when you read that, you noted that's a miracle, isn't it? And then a few sentences later, the Grand Inquisitor asks Jesus, "Why don't you do miracles?" What? Weren't you paying attention? That was a miracle. And then he did 2 of them. He did 2 miracles. What was the other one? He raised the one girl from the dead and he gave sight to the blind. I don't know what a miracle is, if not those. That's clearly not an editing mistake. It's not like Dostoevsky wrote that and said, I wonder if and let that go or missed it. There's got to be some reason why the Grand Inquisitor seems to gloss over that. I'll come to that in a moment. But miracles is an important element of the story. Go ahead.
Doesn't he gloss over it on purpose?
Right, that's the assumption. But why? I mean, doesn't what Jesus just did refute? Well, I'm jumping ahead too much. But it seems contradictory to what the Inquisitor is actually up to. Okay, so Ivan is, again, this is still the rebellion section that leads into the Grand Inquisitor section. Ivan's trying to dissuade Aloysia from going into the priesthood, or at the very least to show him, look, this world is unjust. Right? I respectfully return my ticket. God probably exists, but I deny that this world is just. I don't care that, think of God, and he does this at one point, makes a kind of parallel. Think of God as a perfect parent. And this is an analogy that you find in scriptures. And so Ivan's aware of this. And of course, Dostoevsky is aware of this too. And there's a contemporary version of this, which makes a lot of sense. And Aloysius sort of responds in a way that leads to this analogy being expanded upon. And the analogy is pretty straightforward. It's like, look, yeah, there's suffering in the world. But there's free will. This is the existentialist theme that we've seen ad nauseum, perhaps. There's freedom. God didn't make us as machines, as automatons, as clockwork oranges, to borrow Anthony Burgess's phrase. We are free individuals, and if God were to intervene and stop the suffering, that would be to remove our autonomy. Autonomy is to be self-lawed. God is like a parent, right? This makes sense to us. If you have kids, or if you're thinking about having kids, you'll know that you don't want to be one of those hovering helicopter, you know the helicopter parent thing? You heard of that phrase before? God, I hope I'm not one of those. That's so great to teach in college. I'll sometimes get emails from parents, and I can just say, nope, you got to talk to your son or daughter, because they're adults. I don't have to talk to you. And it feels so good. No offense about your parents, I'm sure are all fine people, but I don't have to deal with them. In high school, I would. I'd have to meet with the parents. Oh, just awful.
Do you get emails from parents?
Yes,
Really?
sometimes.
I didn't think that.
It's not a big. Usually, it's never been a big deal, and it's always the parent being concerned about the student. And I've never said, I'm not saying anything to you. There's FERPA rules here. They're always minor things. So I'm exaggerating the point just to push this. But the helicopter parent is the one who's there for their kid all the time, right? Go ahead.
But, I mean, in this analogy, it's like you wouldn't stand there and let your kid fall off a roof.
They got to learn. What are they doing? Why are they on the roof? Why are they on the roof to begin with?
Because you weren't watching them.
Well, how do they get on the roof? Milo, what are you doing up there? Just playing. Okay. Well, you're going to learn real quick about gravity. That's how I talk. This is your first math lesson. I guess that'd be physics. Same thing, whatever. But yeah, to your point, here's Lola. So, remember Lola? There she's about 1.5 or 2. Cute as a button, but you see what she's doing? This is that's a stairwell that goes down into an abyss, basically. And if she fell down, it would be very bad, right? And she's trying to move this piece of wood. You can't tell what that is. Oops. Yeah, it's a totally different scene there. This is her punishment, by the way, which she goes against. It's the auto-da-fe for her. I did this. See what I did there? There's a piece of wood there, a piece of wood that blocks someone from going through. Why did I do that? To your point earlier. I'm not a terrible parent. That's why I did that. Some of you may remember this. She can't fit through these. I know that. But this space from this wall to there is a little bit wider. And she was playing over there trying to get through at one time. And I didn't have this set up yet. And I thought, that's dangerous. I wonder if she could fit through. And so I tried. So I did. Again, because I'm a good parent. So I tried to fit her head through the slot, and I couldn't do it. I didn't try any butter or anything. I just tried to, and gently. I'm serious. I really did, just to see if it would fit. I was like, no way. No way. And then one day I'm over here in the kitchen cooking, and she had slithered through. This was not there yet. And was just standing there on this tiny ledge, just looking down into the Nietzschean abyss. What Nietzsche would call the abyss. And just truly just looking down as if she looked like she was thinking, what's the point of it all? As if she'd read Camus and came to the wrong conclusion, by the way. That's not what Camus suggested. And I was stunned. I didn't know what to do. Like 3 seconds, I did nothing because I couldn't understand how she get through. And then I just leapt. We have a protective gate, what's that called? Baby gate? Whatever. Leapt over that into the stairwell with great threat to my own well-being. And I held her up, and she cried because she was angry because I took away her free will. I absolutely took her free will away. And Milo asked, why is she crying? I don't remember what I said. Because I'm taking away her free will. But I'm not. How am I taking away her freedom there? This gets to the question that's raised in the Grand Inquisitor, right? If I hadn't, to your earlier point, if I hadn't done anything on anyone's understanding of morality, I am a negligent parent. That seems transparently true. Tracy, you have a question?
Well, I was going to kind of
No? Okay, go ahead.
Was it because, like, if she dies, then there would be a freedom for her to exercise?
Yeah, that's a good point. Where's the free will if she is allowed to do these? I mean, I do that in parking lots, in parking garages where cars just ripping around, and Lola and Milo still just want to run around. I grab their hands and I pull them, sometimes with pain that causes pain. And because I'm angry, number one, they're not listening to me, and I am taking away their freedom. But they will die if I don't do that. And there's a point at which I can't do that all the time, right? I don't attack the doctor for trying to give them a vaccine, right? Measles, mumps, rubella shot, I'll give them that because doctors who are the experts tell me that's the best thing to do and that there is no causal connection between that and autism spectrum. So, just my quick commercial about vaccinating your children and spay and neuter your pets. It's the same deal. Did somebody just do the snap right there when I said that? That's good, I think. But is that analogous to what God is doing, right? Is God a hidden parent? And here we get to the question of the Aloysia's response. Aloysia responds to Ivan's concern about the horrible nature of reality and the suffering of innocent children who surely can't be morally culpable. In fact, the intro to the text you have, it says, Ivan refuses his ticket to heaven if the price is the suffering of one innocent child. Then devout Aloysia reminds his skeptical older brother of the one, capital one, who gave his blood in order to forgive the sins of all. And then Ivan counters with the story of the Grand Inquisitor. Who could sum that up? It's a tough one, but can anyone just sort of give me the Cliff Notes? Is that a thing still? Spark Notes?
That's the one.
Is it now Spark Notes?
Yeah.
You never heard of Cliff Notes? Cliff has been replaced by Spark, apparently.
They're both there.
Cliff Notes is like the actual book.
That's the books. Well, what's the summary of it? What's going on? What's happening? This is an image of the place where... Yes, go on.
Without getting into it really, it's sometime in, I think, the 1600s.
Yeah, this is around... Yeah. Does it give us the date there?
I don't know if this
Yeah, the mid-1600s, yeah.
but there was a period where the Grand Inquisitor had been burning heretics, I guess, for reasons that are kind of obvious. And then Jesus comes back and is captured.
How did he know he was Jesus?
We don't. That's my assumption.
No, sorry. How did the Grand Inquisitor assume? Why did he assume he's
Because
Jesus?
he saw him performing miracles.
Let's see. That's good. Page 2. Under that image, although I give you the color image, you want to see the auto de fe, which means ordeal by fire, by the way. Ordeal by fire. So he had been there. He had been burned by the Cardinal Grand Inquisitor. Very nearly 100 heretics, all in one go. He'd burned so many of them. Ad majorem gloriam Dei, which is for the greater glory of God. Interestingly, he has appeared quietly, unostentatiously. That is, this what becomes the prisoner. Unostentatiously, and yet strange this, everyone recognized him. This seems to be before the miracles, yes?
Yeah.
That could have been one of the best bits of my poem. I don't know why he calls it a poem. There's not a damn thing poetic about this story. I think that's interesting, too. Not accidental. I doubt there's very many accidental things in Dostoevsky's writing. He's extremely detailed in depth with these storylines and all the effects. The question of why it is that everyone recognizes him, the people rush, and he doesn't even answer that, he just sort of leaves that. The people rush towards him with an invincible force, surround him, mass around him, follow him. Saying nothing, he passes among them with a quiet smile of infinite compassion. The sun of love burns in his heart. The beams of life, enlightenment, and power flow from his eyes as they stream over people, shake their hearts with answering love. Well, there's your answer. It's love, apparently. And somehow he's the manifestation of this. You do not have this in the section from the reading for today, but Aloysia pushes this concept of love, Christian love in particular, as the dominant theme in response to a lot of what Ivan is going to portray. In fact, Dostoevsky's central focus, I think, from a Christian perspective in response to all of this is a kind of love that we find within Christ-like love and following Christ, which of course is not easy to do, and you see this in Dostoevsky's writing. Dostoevsky is a Christian, but he provides us, I think, with the rebellion story, with a pretty strong, one of the strongest arguments against God, namely that variation of the problem of evil. And then follows it up with the Grand Inquisitor, where Jesus himself returns. And what is the fate of Jesus initially going to be? What does the cardinal want to happen? What does the Grand Inquisitor want to happen? Burn him at the stake. That's an odd choice. To know that it is the Jesus. To know that it is the Jesus. What movie is that from? And then to willfully tell him, yeah, we're going to burn you. You are the heretic. How ironic is that? You are so behind the times. What became Christianity after you is so different than what you initially started that you no longer qualify. People make this argument in politics a lot, right? This is what your party used to be. Now look at how different you are. 100 years ago, your party would have pushed you aside. That kind of analogy. And so it's fascinating if you get a chance to watch the Spanish Inquisition. Not going to watch that now. Look at what he has on page 4. This is the Grand Inquisitor who has been executing people, but making sure that people are well fed, giving them bread, right? He asks of the prisoner. That's the name given throughout. You have the right to divulge to us so much as one of the mysteries of the world from which you have come. No, you do not, lest you add anything to what has already been said by you, and lest you take away from people the freedom you so stood up for when you were upon the earth. Anything new that you divulge will encroach upon people's freedom to believe. Here's the problem. For it will look like a miracle, and their freedom to believe was what mattered to you most, even back then, 1,500 years ago. Was it not you who so often used to say back then, I want to make you free? Well, but now you have seen those free people, the old man suddenly adds with a thoughtful and ironic smile. Yes, this task has cost us dearly. What does that mean? What's happening here? Yep.
You say you did all this stuff to try to get us free, and you made this your motto and wanted us to be free. Now we finally have freedom, and we've just spent it fixing your mistakes. And now you come back acting like you're just going to change everything. Like when we've done all, you know how powerful the church is now?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, I feel he kind of says, like, way to go, like, congrats, you gave us freedom, but what have you done for us lately?
Yeah! Yes. What song is that? Oh, it's the wrong thing. Huh?
I think that's a lot of stuff.
Oh, okay. What have you done for me lately? Where is the... Sorry, there's a longer quote here. Whoops. Well, let's just continue on then. For nothing has ever been more unendurable to man than human society, than freedom. What Jesus seems to be pushing is followers who willfully follow. And you can't, and a kind of love that cannot be forced. You can't force someone to love. That's what? Not love. You can't, that can't be imposed upon you. Right? What the Grand Inquisitor seems to be saying is that freedom is a problem. Freedom is undesirable. We can continually lie to these people, remove their freedom, and they will still follow us. And he actually makes this point. People prefer lacking in freedom. The anguish that comes with freedom, this is that motif we've seen, and we'll see it in Kierkegaard as well. We're better off the Grand Inquisitor says, without this freedom. Look, you see those stones in that naked, burning, hot wilderness. These are the three temptations. Does anyone know what the three temptations were? Christ in the desert, do you know what they were? Say again, what's that?
No, I was trying to think about last one.
That's okay, yep.
Okay, so, I'll make you king of the entire world and like,
That's the second one, yeah.
conquer, okay? There was one where he could just take off and get rescued by angels by jumping off the building.
Like a miracle, yeah, that's the third one. And then the first one was,
Bread.
I think he just offered him bread. Yeah, foods,
Bread.
right? Yeah. And of course, we know the response to that.
No.
Man does not live alone. Man does not live alone. Man does not live by bread alone. Where is the... I have the actual scriptural text. Sorry. Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. After fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. The tempter came to him and said, "If you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread." It's a weird way of putting it. Jesus answered, "It is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God." Then the devil took him to the holy city and had him stand on the highest point of the temple. "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and they will lift you up in their hands so that you will not strike your foot against the stone." In other words, this is a kind of miracle to which he says, "It is also written, do not put the Lord your God to the test." That's kind of what that is. Now we can go back to my earlier question. What's the deal with the two miracles Jesus silently performed in front of everyone? Nobody asked him to do that. They already knew who he was. So it wasn't him using miracles to, hey, you don't think I'm God? Watch this. That's not what he was doing, right? Those people already had faith. And in fact, even the Grand Wizard, oh my God. I knew it was wrong. Right as I said it, for some reason I didn't stop saying it. Grand Inquisitor. Even he knows that this is Jesus. He doesn't need the miracles, but then he backs off of this and says, wait a minute, because not everyone is like these few who are flocking around you and see the love inside you that is manifest, that is intuitive, or however else you want to put it. What about the masses of people who don't already have this acceptance of who you are? They actually need the miracles, and you've denied it to them. And the last one, the devil took him to the very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and all their splendor. "All this I will give you," he said, "if you will bow down and worship me." Jesus said to him, "Away from me, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only." And then the devil left, and angels came and attended him. Those are the three things that the Grand Inquisitor ultimately adopts and takes on and says, this is something that Jesus himself should have fought for, should have maintained. He goes on, "But you did not want to deprive man of freedom, and you rejected the offer. For what kind of freedom is it, you reasoned, if obedience is purchased with loaves? You retorted that man lives not by bread alone, but you are aware that in the name of that same earthly bread, the earth spirit will rise up against you and fight with you and vanquish you, and everyone will follow it, crying, 'Who is like unto this beast? He has given us fire from heaven.'" Why doesn't Jesus do these things? Well, he's sort of answering these things. The Grand Wizard, however, thinks that this giving of freedom... What? Oh, for nuts. What in the world? That's weird. And it's not good. Although, the Grand Wizard's burning people. The Grand Inquisitor's burning people, and so... I'm sorry. Okay. That threw me off. So, we can't handle freedom. That's basically it. The existentialist motto, the existentialist theme is that freedom is the ultimate moral, foundational pillar of just about everything. But isn't the Inquisitor correct when he says that freedom is less important than food? Right? In fact, we see this in others. We see this around the time of that Jean-Paul Sartre was writing, and de Beauvoir was writing, and Camus was writing, in a time where there's poverty, in the time where there's pain and suffering. First food, and then morality. Why morality first? Why a Christian ethic? Why this striving for, and I'll talk more about how freedom relates to this in a moment, but why put that first? Isn't Bertolt Brecht correct? And isn't the Grand Inquisitor correct? Food first, and then we'll worry about virtue. Yeah?
Yes, he's correct, but then you could also look at it in a sense of, from a perspective of somebody who is using their life to follow Christ into heaven, to make their way to heaven, then they would put morality before food, possibly, just because, like, I think, like, one of the, not analogies, but one of the points he was trying to make was, like, people, like, suffer on earth in order to, like, achieve an afterlife, and that's, like, the problem of free will, and then the other way around is to, like, ignorantly be able to follow if Christ had not, like, done the three things.
What do you mean ignorantly, though? What does that mean, ignorantly follow? Blind faith, or do you mean something different?
Maybe not ignorantly, but willlessly.
Oh, so that's without, yeah. What does that mean, willlessly? Like, maybe, you know the story of Saul? I'll get your hands in 1 second. Saul, on the road to Damascus, who then later became Paul, second founder of Christianity, ultimately. You know the story, his conversion? Nobody knows the story of Saul, who was a persecutor of Christians? And they became Paul. He became another person, right? He became a Christian. In fact, he became the most important Christian in the founding of its faith and its belief system. And yet he was a persecutor of Christians. I mean, he was horrible to Christians. And then on the road to Damascus, what happens? He's converted like that.
And he used to be a persecutor and cancel him.
Well, how did he do it? Did he choose? He hears a voice. He sees Christ saying, "Why are you persecuting me and my people?" It's not a matter of, I wonder what that voice was. Was that? Who was that? It was God talking directly to you. It's not a matter of, should I choose to believe that God is there? Is that how belief works? Do you see where this is going? And I'll get the other, there's a few other hands. There's too many things here. Oh, you knew that a great deed would be preserved in scriptures. This is actually a play based on this. For man does not seek God so much as miracles. I'll come back to that in a moment. And this is important. This is where the Grand Inquisitor is able to get people to follow him, because the Grand Inquisitor gives the people what they want, and they don't have to think. And people like that, whether it's a guru, whether it's a follower that there's somebody you can follow and give you the answers. People prefer that. This seems to be what Dostoevsky seems to be implying. You don't have that with Christianity. Here you still have, and this is an existentialist Christianity, there you have the individual free choices continually, and there's anguish, there's angst, and we're going to see it with respect to Kierkegaard as well. And I'm going to leave you, this is what I was trying to get to, this questions that we're dealing with right now. Okay, that's funnier if we understand. I skipped. Damn, I went out of order there. So that was a funny joke. But let me get back to the questions. I think it's 1, 2, and 3. You had a hand up earlier? No? Go ahead.
So the earlier thing about food of morality, I feel like sometimes it's better for morality to come over food because it's sort of vague, like you don't know like how much food is enough before we start looking at morality.
How much comfort, Aristotle speaks to this, how much comfort does one need in order to do philosophy? And it's always interesting that people in prison, philosophers still do philosophy in prison. They're given so little, and yet they still have a compulsion to do it. And so Aristotle may be mistaken about that one has to have a certain level of leisure. Prison is not leisure. That's a good question. Where do you draw that line? Well, having some. That's what Bertolt Brecht's talking about. That's what the Inquisitor is talking about. If I'm starving, nothing matters. I don't care if the universe is infinite or not. I don't care if deductive proofs can give me God's existence. I want bread. I want to survive. Yeah. Oh, you have another
I
follow-up?
was gonna say, but then at the same time, like if you teach a bunch of people to put morality before food, then it's an easy way to like make them think that they're doing something by starving themselves.
Oh, well, that's different. You can look at Gandhi fasting in order to try and free India from British rule. That's a tactic, a moral, or a tactic for a moral end, and it just so happens to be using a method of starvation, of fasting. And so, yeah, I guess that would make your point there. But that's a choice on his part. When somebody's starving, he chose to fast. That's not the same thing as starving, actually. Yeah, and then...
I forget, like, what exactly I was going to say, but is it, like, to say, like, freedom is, like, independent of, like a God's existence? Like, isn't that kind of wrong? Because, like, if there was, like, if we had proof that God existed, like, and they do in this, or, like, Jesus existed, like they do in this situation of the Inquisitor, then, like, really, like, nothing, there's no sense, there's no need for freedom, because you already know there's an afterlife, you already know where you're going.
Oh, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, for the people whose child was just resurrected, they don't have many doubts. It would be weird if that were the case, although you get into interesting debates about this today with theists, believers who say, look, show me God coming out of the sky and telling everyone, I am God, and I'll show you a devil. That's not God. Well, why not? Why must God remain hidden, is the word that's often used. However, to your point, that gets at these two questions. Yeah. Isn't this intervention? At least in the example given with by Ivan, the people already believed that they knew somehow, intuitive, that that's Jesus before the miracles. So there, at least, the miracles aren't being used in that fashion. But what about for the rest of us? Ivan's asking. What about for those who don't already recognize or see that there is a God? Yeah.
So
or Christian God in particular.
The Inquisitor is explaining his motivations to Christ, right? And at the very end he says, but of course you already knew everything I was just about to say because you're Christ. You already know everything. Mm. This seemed really confusing to me because on the face of it, right, like if I'm talking to a friend, right, who already knows what I think about something, I'm not going to bother repeating my position because they already know what I think, right?
But you do, though, don't you? You've done it. You've done it.
So why
are you doing this? You know what I'm going to say. This Sartre would have something to say about this, too. You knew I was going to say that. There's something about the individual getting it out, right? It may just be, that's one way of looking at it. And the other is perhaps your choice of going to that person in Sartrean language. You've already chosen that person, knowing what they're going to say, and that's why you went to them with the things that you were going to say. Why the Grand Inquisitor does this, I mean, that's a fundamental problem for any theist who says, my prayers, petitionary prayer, God, please do this. Well, do you really think the prayer is going to have an effect on God? Or an omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent being that's going to be swayed by you? Right? Oh, let me do good on this test, God. I promise, blah, 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 blah. Just let me do good on this test. God hears, oh, sure. I don't know what I'm doing here, but this is pointing down. As if God didn't see this ahead of time. Or in the moment, so to speak. Or is prayer for the person doing the prayer, not to change the mind of an omnipotent, omniscient God? So I think there's the tension with respect to that. Let me get a couple more hands. 1, 2, and 3, and then we'll probably be done.
Yeah, so on the topic of like him being a hidden God or not intervening, would you be able to say that like his interaction, even with those few people, like contrary to the Grand Inquisitor's belief, like those people would go and tell others and be like, look, like this guy came and brought this girl back to life and healed this blind dude. Would those people who were then told and didn't actually witness it and only are like believing still have more faith?
I see.
Because of their
that's good.
In that turn, be acting in bad faith. They're only acting now out of good because they know there's like an afterlife.
Oh, that's so complex.
Sorry.
No, it's good. That's the right question. It's one of the right questions. one thing to say is that one of the reasons arguments are made now of how Christianity spread so quickly as the way that it did is that it was shown, actually it's parallel to this, people could see in the followers of Christ something that had changed them. And that affected others and enabled the spread. And so that doesn't necessarily imply bad faith. It's saying something's happened to this person. Their lives have been changed, presumably for the better. Even though there are martyrs happening and all of that, it was still seen as something that probably played a significant role in the spread of Christianity. The question of bad faith and good faith, I can't answer that. It's a really good question. I don't mean to dismiss it, but because it's tied in with all this. If I know something, then I'm not having faith in it. I know there's a table here, and I can't choose to believe there isn't. I don't have faith that there's a table. That's the wrong word, and that gets into interesting complexities.
I was just going to point out that it was been...
Oh, you were right. Thank you. And was there one more real quick, and then we'll wrap it up.
I was kind of just going on one of the questions, how can free will make sense of natural evils due to the fact that supposedly everyone is free? There's not that everyone's good, so that way the people that are bad, that are free can cause evil throughout the world, and then that can cause a chain of reactions to cause either more evil and or more good. So
natural evils being like hurricanes, earthquakes, tsunamis.
So I'm talking like man-made evil, like World War II,
Yeah.
or slavery, or repression. I think free will, honestly, is probably natural evils. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Question.
That's the problem. How does my free will have anything to do with the dinosaurs going extinct? And that was probably unpleasant. That's a terrible ending. But please please remember online quiz 8 on Dostoevsky, and I will see you at A160. There's no rain, so good. The Lord has shined brightly upon us.
Is A160 the one that we had last year? The same room that we had for intro?
Oh, probably. I have had a class there, yeah. A160 is the administration building.
Yeah, I think that's
Yes.
Have you seen A Serious Man by like the Coen Brothers?
Yes.
Yeah.
Who is in that?
It's about like this Jewish, Judaism has a lot to fit there, but it's like this Jewish math professor who's basically his whole life is like, why are bad things happening to me? I haven't done anything.
Who's the character?
I forgot his name. I actually don't know his name.
Yeah, I definitely know what that is. It's Job, basically.
Yeah.
It's quite Job. Yeah, I'll have to look into that. I can't remember. But I don't know that I saw it. I think I read about it and I saw the title of it.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's really short. I recommend it. It's one of their shorter.
Is it Joaquin Phoenix?
No. I don't know the guy.
Okay, all right.
He's not like a typical lead.
Okay. All right. Yes. A160 on the other side of campus, the administration building. Okay. Administration building.